Hi everyone, welcome to our webinar, What's New at AVID Summer Institute. I'm Kayla Burrow, AVID's Marketing Communications Specialist, and as a former AVID teacher myself, I remember the excitement leading up to Summer Institute, and I know that the new training strands you'll learn about today will make you even more pumped for this summer. Just some quick housekeeping. We are recording today's broadcast, and a link to the recording along with this slide deck will be emailed to you early next week. All participants are in listen-only mode, but you can communicate with us in the chat box. We'll have 10 minutes at the end of today's webinar. Oh, got to mute somebody. We'll have 10 minutes at the end of today's webinar for Q&A, so please submit your questions in the chat box throughout the presentation, and we'll do our best to answer those at the end. I also want to encourage you to get social with us throughout the year with hashtag #ThisIsAvid on your favorite social media channels, and at Summer Institute with hashtag AvidSI18. You can find AVID on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and we'll be sure to share links to all of those when we send you the recording of today's presentation. I also just want to remind you that Summer Institute registration opens on Tuesday, February 13th at 6 a.m. Pacific time. So be sure to mark your calendars as many of our strands and Summer Institutes will fill up fast. Here's an overview of what we'll cover today. There are 3 brand new strands, 2 concerning writing, and 1 on digital teaching and learning. We've also updated our AVID Bridges to Success strand. And here are the folks who are going to tell you all about them. We have Jennifer Nagel, project manager for our curriculum team, Andy Jensen, the learning designer for our interaction design team, and Dr. Tim Bugno, AVID's curriculum manager. And with that, I am going to turn things over to Jen.
Great. Thank you, Kayla. All right, here we go. So we're really excited about one of the newest resources in our curriculum library that will be released this summer at Summer Institute, and it's a new book titled AVID Writing for Disciplinary Literacy. This is a resource that has been in development for just a little bit over 2.5 years, so it's been quite the labor of love, and it really came about because writing is such an important part of WICWR and the instructional framework that we use within AVID. And so when we stepped back and looked at what does writing really look like across our schools, across our campuses, across all of this world of AVID, and started to talk to educators and just ask, what does this look like? The feedback that we were given is, yes, writing is important and we understand that, but I don't know how to actually make it work in my classroom. I don't feel like I'm the right person to teach writing. I'm not a published author. If I was, I probably wouldn't be a math teacher, although that's not necessarily true. And it takes a lot of time. I don't know how to navigate the grading. I just don't feel like I'm the right person for the job. And so that caused us about 2.5 years ago to really dig in and to develop this resource. As an outcome of this resource, we have 2 strands. And so anyone attending either of these strands will have this book as the curriculum resource that they receive. And it is just a rich, beautiful tool that everyone will be very happy to have back on their campuses and use in their classrooms. So there's 2 strands connected to this. One is called AVID Learning Through Writing, a Schoolwide Approach. And we're kind of playing a little bit with that term, writing to learn, because we feel it's something that we use so often that it's lost its meaning. And so we've shifted the paradigm around it and are really emphasizing that learning through writing is what we want to accomplish in our classrooms. It's the more engaging way to teach. And then the second strand is AVID Content Area Writing, a Schoolwide Approach. So let's talk about who should attend these strands. The Learning Through Writing strand is a strand for educators that want to really deepen their understanding and expertise in having writing be a robust part of their daily instruction. And so this is writing from the place of, all of the processing of information, the processing of content, the quick writes and the listicles and, coming up with analogies, and writing as a way to deepen the understanding of the content we're presented with in class. The content area writing strand is a strand that's really focusing on making sure educators have tools for teaching students how to show what they've learned, and that writing is writing that usually ends up being graded, whereas writing that happens in that learning through writing experience, we grade the content. We use that content as a way to just really have a wonderful formative assessment and to figure out where students are with their content knowledge, but we don't necessarily grade the writing. Whereas content area writing, it's now writing that will be published or shared with another person in some way. Both of these strands are school-wide, elementary through higher ed, open to all educators, and they're very differentiated so that everyone will be able to get what they need from them. So let's kind of take a deep dive into what the Learning Through Writing strand will include. One of the pieces that lives in this book is this is now where note-taking for AVID exists. And so all of the resources and kind of the starting point of note-taking will go back to a chapter in this disciplinary writing book. And with that, we had to look at what note-taking across all of AVID actually looked like. And we realized that having students change how they take notes as they transition from elementary to middle to high school was not the best approach for students that needed extra time and really needed those note-taking pieces to be a scaffold that they can depend on. And so we were given the opportunity to just really dig into what note-taking is and why it matters and why it is such a crucial tool for learning. And so in this strand, the Learning Through Writing strand, the revised note-taking process will be shared and introduced to the teachers there. They'll really have a deep dive into focused note-taking. And a couple of the differences, just so you know, is that we still believe Cornell notes are a wonderful way to take notes, but they are one wonderful way to take notes. And so Cornell notes, 2-column notes, 3-column notes, graphic organizers, mind maps, there are so many wonderful ways that students can engage in the note-taking process. And what's more important than the format is what we're doing with those notes and how we're using them as a tool for learning. And so that's one of the big focus areas for this strand. Also looking at what are rigorous strategies for having students write in every grade level, every discipline, every day as a way to deepen their content knowledge, deepen their understanding, and for a teacher to really be able to assess and identify at the end of a class period or at the end of a lesson, where are my students with this concept? And it's fun. It's going to be just a really rich, wonderful learning experience. So that's the AVID Learning Through Writing strand, and it's a wonderful one for every educator. The second strand is the AVID Content Area Writing strand, and this is a strand that's really focusing on this idea of disciplinary literacy. I think one of the things that we do really well in AVID is we unpack that hidden curriculum of what successful students just somehow know to do, and then students that work really hard but just can't find that same success, it's probably they don't know the secret rules of the game. And one of those is that when students go to college, there's an assumption from their math professor, there's an assumption from their sociology professor that when they're given a writing assignment, they actually can write in that discipline, that they write like a mathematician, they are able to write like a historian, they're able to write like a scientist. And as we look at how we teach writing, usually writing is taught by the English language arts teacher, and students are taught to write like someone who loves literature. And that's not the same kind of writing that we use in math or science or history. So we really unpack this idea of disciplinary literacy in this strand and what it means to write like a mathematician, historian, sociologist, etc. The other piece is we take the idea of the writing process and apply it to every discipline. Not that we're saying to math teachers that we need to have students write 5-paragraph essays, because that's not the purpose of the writing process. The writing process is a way for students to take content knowledge and turn it into something that they can share with another person or an audience. So if it's a claim evidence reasoning that they're having to build in science, or maybe they're analyzing data sets in a math class and then developing some sort of graphic or data table that they're going to publish or include in a blog or some way share it with other people, that involves the writing process. That involves going from, brainstorming and doing your drafting all the way through to having something that you are proud to share. And finally, we really want to emphasize the idea that writing is about thoughts. It's not a craft that just a few can practice. It's something that everyone can get better at, everyone can do well with. Writing is one of the most wonderful ways that we can actually be successful and show the world what we know and what we can do. And it's also one of the areas that if we don't feel confident in writing, it will hold us back. So the content area writing strand is for teachers that are really wanting to deepen their use of writing and integrate that writing process. They're wanting students to write things that are then shared with other people. So moving forward, prerequisites, there aren't any. These strands can be taken in any order. So it's really a matter of what feels like the right approach for an individual teacher. As I said, they're both very differentiated. There is work and wonderful learning that whether you're an AVID elective teacher or a 4th grade teacher or a high school AP teacher, either strand really will benefit you. I think it's a matter of identifying what do I want to focus on this coming year, what do I want to get better at, and then which strand is the right fit. And ideally, what can be taken back and used with my campus. One of the pieces that we did include in the book is that every chapter has learning for, all of the different ways that we're maybe taking the idea of mentor texts and bringing that into our classroom. But then at the end of the chapter, there's an instructional practice for how do we take this school-wide and what could be done in a staff meeting or a site team meeting or a PLC around the idea of mentor text so that every educator is also able to kind of get up to speed on that. And so I think that anyone that's coming to the strands will have wonderful tools to take back to their campus to share with all of the other teachers there as well. So no prerequisites, they can be taken in any order. So why attend? I think if you're really wanting to push student achievement on your campus to the next level, we know that writing is one of the ways to do that. There are wonderful strategies to be taken school-wide. And we also know that writing is what keeps kids successful at college. So when we talk about persistence and why students are able to stay at college, it's because they really do feel that they can write confidently and competently, and they are not constantly struggling with writing as being a barrier to their success. And the same with career. As we move into this next chunk of time, and as we look at everything that technology is bringing us, we know that writing really is something that every single industry relies on the power of educators being able to make sure students have that skill mastered. And so it's something that for both college and career, we need to carry forward. And so that's why we would love for you to join us at any of the summer institutes in either of these two strands. They're both going to just be wonderful experiences. So with that, we will have time for questions at the end. So if you have questions and you put them into the chat panel, know that Kayla is capturing them and we will do a Q&A at the end of this. But for now, I'm going to hand this over to Andy Jensen, who is the Learning Designer Manager, or some brilliant title, and he will talk about another super exciting strand that we're so proud to have. So Andy, it is all yours.
All right, thank you, Jen. It is super exciting to get to share with everybody our new digital teaching and learning strand. Kind of high level, what are some of the things in this strand? This is a new departure for AVID to go into digitizing things that we already do in Wicker, and not just replacing what we do, but then going the next step to take the benefits of that technology. So really, like, main goals of attending this strand, people are going to get a lot of growth mindset. There are some times where things are challenging, and it's about reflecting on your teaching practice and growing through those challenges. Big focus on learning goals first and the technology second. This strand is not about going through digital tools and putting those on people because they can be fun. It's about learning first and then choosing tools that support those learning goals. And kind of building on that then is planning in how are we using those tools to enhance instruction instead of just doing what we could have done on paper. So who should attend? Who is our audience for this strand? It has been designed for middle and high school teachers, AVID elective teachers, AVID coordinators, administrators, but again, really focusing on that middle and high school level. These educators would be in a one-to-one environment. That can mean a lot of different things depending on where you are. Our definition is here. I would say the most important part to look at there is whoever that educator is, they work in a place that has daily in-class access to devices for each student. So if I'm a teacher and my school is not one-to-one, but I have a cart, and so every kid in my class has access to a device every single day, then for the purposes of this strand, then that teacher is one-to-one, right? Could be an administrator where everybody on their campus, every student has access to a device. But the idea being that the content we're going to share is really about routine, kind of guaranteed access while kids are in the classroom. And this strand is for educators who are already skilled with technology. That doesn't mean highly skilled. That just means that they're bringing some basic skills and experience in the classroom in that one-to-one environment. And building on that a little bit here is the types of skills that we're looking for people to come with. For the most part, simple things. It's just that there's not instruction about here's how you open a new browser tab, or here's how you open a new file. You know, we say things like, whatever platform you're using, open a new file, and we're going to get ready to take notes, or we're going to do a quick write, or you know, we're kind of assuming that people are going to have some of those basic skills, and then we're looking at now where can we take those in the strand. Big one on this list is connecting to a Wi-Fi network outside of their school. So want to make sure that they are able to connect to the Wi-Fi in the strand that they're in. Some of the highlights from the strand is the 4A's framework for digital teaching and learning, which is similar to some other frameworks out there that you may have heard of, like SAMR or TPAC. The purpose of this framework is to add on to that content that's out there and make a tie between, okay, I want to grow in my practice with digital tools. I also want to stay true to AVID Wicker strategies. That 4A's document is there to help bridge the gap between those two things. Also, we spend a lot of time on doing critical reading using digital tools, whether that's a written text or it could be video, but how can we get kids in there interacting and collaborating, going through AVID's critical reading process? A couple of the most fun parts of the strand is we have a Sweet 16 app smackdown where teachers in the strand are working in groups, and they're researching, each group is researching an individual app, and then we're having like a bracket challenge for the group to find out what's the most powerful app, the best app that people researched in the room and then voted on. So it's kind of a fun way to get exposed to 16 new apps that you may not have heard of or used before. We also do a digital breakout EDU. For those who haven't heard of breakout EDU, it's like a escape room where there's puzzles. You need to decode those puzzles and then use the answers to unlock locks. So we do a digital version of that, and that's something that a teacher can just take that link and go plug it into their classroom and use the same activity with their students. People who attend the strand and attend the full strand, so all 3 days, get a badge. So that's a digital badge that says AVID Digital Teaching and Learning on it, and that's something where they can take it and insert it into their email signature or use it in social media. There's some different sizes that come with it, so people can kind of tweak it out and use it in the way that they want to. So prerequisites. Looking at this, if I'm a content teacher, is a year 2 strand. So we really want people to have that foundation in AVID, particularly with Wicker, in their content level. So if I'm a science teacher, really want to attend Science 1 before then coming to the digital teaching and learning strand. If I'm an AVID elective teacher coordinator or administrator for that matter, this is most likely a year 4 strand for those people, only because we already have a track of strands for them to attend in their first 3 years. So like AVID elective teacher, they're going through those implementation strands. So they get a really strong handle on the AVID elective before then attending digital teaching and learning. Same thing with administrators and the leadership strands. So what kind of materials do people need to bring? Definitely got to bring a laptop. That is preferred. I will say if somebody brings a tablet, let's say I'm in a one-to-one iPad classroom, it makes a lot of sense for me to bring my iPad. That's okay. I think the laptop is preferred just for ease of use with the keyboard, and typical screen size is bigger. I would say a phone does not provide the same level of access. So we're saying laptop number 1, tablet 2, phone really not something that you're going to want to go through the strand activities with. Definitely bring a power cord. Maybe that goes without saying, but need to get it on anyway so people can be sure that they're managing the charge on their device. Some really big things to think about here is a lot of teachers are going to bring the device that they're issued through their district. It is very important that they have logged into that device on their district network before attending the training. If that is the first time that they're logging into this device and they are not at their district, there's a good chance that their device is not going to work. And there's just nothing we can do about it at that point. It needs to sync with their district network. So definitely something people want to be aware of before they attend. Same thing with just updating web browser, making sure that you're ready to go when you show up, bringing earbuds and headphones for when we do that video work. All of this stuff, the materials that are needed, as well as the skills that we're asking people to come with, those are things that come up in a survey as people go through registration. So they'll go in and say, yes, check that I do have these skills, and I am aware that I need to bring these materials. They need to check those things off before they are able to register. And to build on that a little bit, I'm not super familiar with the registration process, so if you have questions, maybe that's something Kayla can answer at the end. But I do know that we're not going to have group registration for digital teaching and learning. So if I'm a coordinator, I'm not going to be able to go in and say put 4 people in here at the same time, because we need people to go through those surveys and understand what they need to bring and verify that they have the skills. A coordinator could go in and still sign those people up. They're just going to need to do them individually, not in a batch. And it looks like that is those are the end of my slides. So definitely hoping to see a lot of people at our digital teaching and learning strands this summer. Thank you.
Perfect. So the last in the Fabulous 4 new or changed significantly is the AVID Bridges to Success strand that's going to take place. One thing just in going into this, because this is really the first session out of these 3 that you've heard about that has an existing knowledge base around that. But one thing to think about is that, you know, this isn't your grandparents' Bridges strand. So there's a lot of changes that have happened within this, and so I'll kind of talk through a good number of those. So who should attend the strand? The first thing is that this is written for content teachers grades 5 to 8. So it's really looking at that developmental scope of 5th to 8th grade students. The goal of this is to progress them, both the educators and the students, more purposefully into the foundational skills that they learn in the foundational strands in elementary, and then moving them into a more developmentally appropriate for what that 5th to 8th grade student is going to be able to handle in terms of building their academic skills. It's not written for any type of specific content. So these could be self-contained teachers. These could be, some that are teaching, a core of English and history, or a science and math teacher. And again, it's that 5th to 8th grade. One of the questions also that always comes up is this an elementary strand? Is this a middle school strand? I know that was a big confusion point in terms of the last one that occurred. This is both. So it's intended for both elementary and middle school. And so having that ability to know if you're an elementary, potentially K-5, K-6, you're a K-8 school, you're a 6-8 school, that this strand could potentially be right for you. In addition, elective teachers can also take part in this strand, although we aren't really, this isn't developed for AVID elective teachers. And the reason for that is that one of the biggest things about this strand is that it really contains a wide variety of Wicker strategies that are aligned to the system. And so the way to kind of think of it is that in several of the other things that we've heard of, of the content writing and the digital teaching, that's kind of a mile wide and a mile deep in a content specific thing. And you can think of this as kind of 10 feet deep, but 50 miles wide in terms of the content that we're covering and the AVID strategies. And so one analogy may be that when you're thinking through, okay, what were all these things that they talked about? If you take away one thing from this, it's kind of this analogy, is that if you show up to a restaurant and you're going to order an appetizer, you could get the calamari, you could get a plate of the nachos, but a lot of the times they'll have that sampler for, well, I'm not really sure which one that I want, that contains, maybe 5 or 6 calamari, and it's got several of the other things. And that's really what this strand is designed around. So you can also think of this as a student success strand. And so that, a lot of people are familiar with that student success. And it's really based on the same kind of thinking as what that student success strand is built for. And so the question might come up, well, why then, build out the Bridges strand if there's already a strand for this? Couple reasons. First is that, which actually hits on that second bullet point, is that it also incorporates a lot of the latest AVID strategies and thinking around this content. So the latest focused note-taking materials are not only included in the strand, but also embedded in the book. It's also the first book out of the AVID library that's going to contain the collaborative study group information. So it's the only book that has that. So one, it has the latest strategies, and then two, it's really built around, which is that last point, of a 5th to 8th grade developmentally approach. And so the idea is that in elementary, in the early years, they're working on some of those fundamental skills of the basics of how to organize and the basics of how to take notes and to group ideas together. And so here it starts building on those things. So it deals more with backward mapping, where students are doing a lot more to take a complex task and break it out into its different stages independently. They're learning a lot more about organization. There's also information in there about some design thinking, which is also kind of a new area. So a lot of really good highlights, and a lot of really good, of some of the latest thinking and the strategies that have been evolved. In terms of prerequisites, the one prerequisite is that if it's a 5th grade teacher that's coming in, that foundation should be taken first. And the reason for that is that, one, the teacher really needs to know those what's taught in foundations in terms of what is best for their students, and that's really at AVID what we're about, is what's best for the student. Because the reason is that if they go into Bridges, and the way Bridges handles this is that there's already some level of development around organization, around taking notes, around a lot of these concepts. And so if those skills haven't been built out in students, they haven't been taught to students, then a 5th grade student is probably going to struggle a lot more than if they go to foundations first and they have those skills. And so that 5th grade for those 5th grade teachers, it's really highly recommended that foundations is first. But 6th to 8th grade, that whole spectrum, this could potentially be a 1st year strand. It could also be a 2nd year strand. So if a 6th grade teacher has already gone to the foundations, and potentially even maybe some of the other ones of critical reading, or a lot of the other strands that are available for them, this is a great 2nd or 3rd year strand. The one piece, I'll click to the next slide. Sorry, make sure I didn't miss it. Okay. In terms of the why attend, one of it obviously is the exposure that's accelerating that learning for students. But specifically in terms of why attend the Bridges strand as opposed to some other options, is that wide spectrum of Wicker strategies that are being taught in this strand. And so that really is the highlight of what this strand can do, is just the huge variety that they'll end up coming out with. And that's also, ironically, the reason that we're saying this probably isn't really what an AVID elective teacher should take. And the reason being is that when they take implementation for the first time, they've already been exposed to a lot of the strategies. And so probably they would sit through the whole strand, and the only thing that would really necessarily be new to them is some of the collaborative study group and the new focused note-taking, because they've been exposed to that wide variety in their first 3 years of the sequence that we rep for AVID elective teachers. But for brand new content teachers, for self-contained classrooms in that 5th to 8th grade spectrum, this is a perfect one to get exposure to a lot of things that teachers can go back and utilize within their classroom. One other thing that I'll just kind of mention here to think about is that there is obviously, in the case that I gave earlier of, in some instances where a middle school or a K-8 school has a teacher that teaches both science and math. There's huge advantages, obviously, in those cases of sending that teacher to a math strand or sending them into the science strand. But there's also advantages in this, is that, and disadvantages. In the instances of that, if they attend the math strand, they're not getting that information on the science, right? So that's kind of a downside of sending them into a specific one. If you're sending a teacher like that teaches multiple subjects, or is potentially one of those elective teachers, the advantage of that is they get a wide exposure to a lot of strategies. And potentially, if you have a math English teacher that teaches both subjects and a science math teacher that teaches both subjects, they are now being exposed to the same information. And so now they can come in and have a very similar exposure to the strategies, and they can talk about the strategies in a way that's not specifically connected into that content, which has some huge advantages. Obviously some of the disadvantages is that at no point are they going to spend huge amounts of time saying, here's how you do this in math, or here's how you do this in a history part. What they'll do is a lot of time in terms of debriefing to say, okay, let's talk about how this applies in a variety of content areas. So that's kind of that trade-off that you're looking there, but in terms of the exposure of the variety of strategies, this is a really large one that's potentially beneficial. So we encourage you, and if you have questions, you can also type that in, because I know this is a new area that we're going into. Okay, and with that, I will turn it back over to Kayla.
Thanks so much, Tim and Andy and Jen. While you guys are still getting more questions typed into the chat, I just wanted to share our contact information with you as well. We have a new AVID Care team here, and you can reach them at avidcare@avid.org for any and all questions that are AVID related, and they will get you the help and support that you need. We're also on Twitter. You can follow us, AVID for College, and you can follow each of our presenters as well. And maybe you can get Tim Bugno to tweet some more, because he doesn't do it very often. So presenters, I'm going to unmute all of you, and we're going to answer some of these questions. And again, you guys, just keep your questions coming in the chat, because we have plenty of time for Q&A today. First question is for Tim. Tim, can you distinguish the Bridges for Success Strand and the AVID Summer Bridge, and anything else we might have Bridge in the title of?
Good, yeah, or Success in the title. Those are the two big ones. So the AVID Summer Bridge, that's designed specifically around accelerating either math or science in a summer program. So the idea is it's kind of that way to really launch students into higher levels of math or science. So that's the AVID Summer Bridge. So if you hear summer before the word bridge, think math and science. It's a specific curriculum for that. The student success, because again, that's the other word that people are going to get confused in, that bridges to success. The student success, the way the concept of it is that it's for middle to high school, but then it's also really designed for elective teachers that don't have another strand to go into. And I'm not talking AVID elective, I'm talking your business teacher, your art teacher, your foreign language teacher. So there's not a specific curriculum that's designed, the PE teacher. So in that sense, student success is built for those teachers. Now, the concept of Bridges to Success is the closest to student success. The real distinguishing feature is that we're targeting a 5th to 8th grade, kind of thinking self-contained teachers that teach, multiple subjects. This is a way to not delve super deep into a specific content area, but we're still getting the strategies across about how we actually use these skills or build these skills.
Awesome. Thank you, Tim. Our next question is for Jen. Would the content area writing strand be more beneficial to content teachers or AVID elective teachers, or both? This teacher is looking to share the caseload for any content area teacher that she can register.
Absolutely. Both, I think, is the answer. One of the pieces that we have pulled into this is that when we look at research around writing, we have learned that about 85% of what we learn about content happens in the pre-writing stages. And so we're trying to build a way that we can use the same language around the stages of the writing process across a campus. And so that includes in the AVID elective teacher's classroom as well as a math teacher. I think that unfortunately, when students sit down to take a high-stakes test that includes writing, they don't use the writing process because they're not used to thinking about like brainstorming, using a graphic organizer, doing a quick write, all of those pieces that they do all the time as part of the writing process. And so we're making that connection in this strand, and it's really something that is accessible for really any content teacher or AVID elective teacher that wants to help their students become better writers.
Awesome. Our next question is a little more Summer Institute specific. I am looking forward to taking 10 staff members from our site. That's awesome. What percentage do you recommend for teachers, admin, elective teachers? Do you have a recommendation?
Great question.
Yeah, so I guess I'll field that one. So yes, there is a recommendation, and probably even talking with your program manager about specifically what might best suit your needs. Generally, it's really advised to bring an administrator with you as often as you can to get the principal of the school, because we know how key that leadership is. Also having, if a counselor hasn't been involved up until that point, you know, making sure that they're also attending. And then really from there, you should probably think about a combination of two things when you're choosing people in terms of content. One is spreading them out in terms of what strands they're going to, so that they're being exposed to a variety of ideas. And then two, you're also going to want to bring the teachers that can take this information back into their departments and share out those pieces. So you really want to try and think about teachers that have that ability on your campus and the reputation of being somebody that's well respected within their department and within the school, because those teachers then are going to be able to communicate out these strategies more effectively.
Awesome, thanks, Tim. And we have another question that you might be the best person to answer, Tim. We have a brand new AVID site on with us. Welcome to the AVID family. They're starting with 9th grade students in the fall and want to know about a little bit more about the specific set of classes the elective teacher needs to take. And she also has core content teachers and is just wondering about the set schedule of training classes of Strand.
Yeah, so the best thing to do is there's a poster that actually has two sides. One has the hashtag "This is AVID," and then on the flip side, there's actually a recommended schedule of what you should send people to in terms of their first year. So you would want to look at those first year strands, and it'll recommend where you would send them to. And in terms of the AVID elective and the set schedule, there's really a three-year cycle that we encourage, and actually for certification need. The first one is high school implementation in your case, since it's a high school. Second year would then be tutorology, so that would either be within a path or coming back for a second summer. And then the third one is advancing the AVID elective, which is that third one that we kind of recommend in that cycle. So that would be the cycle for an AVID elective teacher. The other ones, content area teachers, you would want to consider in that first year their content area that they teach. So if they're a math teacher, they would go to a math strand. For all the core, we have those. We also have, if you're looking at academic language and literacy and other great strands, the two writing strands that Jen was talking about earlier are also really great first year strands for people to attend as well.
Awesome, thanks, Tim. And that question was from Anthony. I think I had said she earlier, but he's going to be one of our new AVID dads. Next question is for Andy. So, Andy, I have a digital integration specialist in my AVID sites. This position is new, and most of them are Google certified educators. Some have attended sessions at SI and others have not. Would the digital teaching and learning strand be suitable for them? Should I only allow those with previous AVID SI experience to participate? And their district is very progressive with AVID training. They have 4 staff developers. So it sounds like they're very steeped in AVID. So what do you think about their new digital integration specialists attending the digital teaching and learning strand?
Yeah, I think that would be fantastic for them to attend. They would still need to just satisfy that prerequisite of finishing. For them, I would like to put them in the pool of content teachers, so getting a year one strand of some type, like the ones Tim just mentioned, would be fantastic. The idea behind that is we really don't cover AVID basics in the digital teaching and learning strand. We kind of assume that everybody has a foundational understanding of things like Wicker, right? And then we're going to build on that and look at it through a digital perspective. So they need to have finished one strand previously. That doesn't mean Summer Institute. They could go to a PATH training and get that requirement and then attend digital teaching and learning at any of the Summer Institutes.
Awesome. Thank you, Andy. We have another question for you. Can you define what exactly one-to-one means?
Oh, yeah, that's why I put that up there. It just means a lot of different things depending on different schools and how they're set up. We need to look at it more from the perspective of the person attending, and to say the students that that person works with need to have daily, individual, in-class access to a device. So I guess some examples of what that could look like. That means a kid could have a device that they take home and bring to school, and it's their device, and they use it in every single class. That's fantastic. Maybe it's a device that they just check out at the beginning of the day, and they use it all day, and they check it back in. That's great. Maybe every classroom has a cart, and students have an assigned device in every class they walk into. Maybe it's not in every class, but I'm an AVID elective teacher, and we got a grant, and I have a cart just for my AVID elective class. Well, you know, for all intents and purposes, it's one-to-one in that classroom. And so as we train those teachers, or educators for that matter, in the strand, we're just looking at it through every kid you're working with has guaranteed daily routine access to a device.
Maybe some non-examples would help too.
Some non-examples would be there's a computer lab and I check out time every now and then and we go in, or there's carts I can check out, but I don't have them every single day.
Awesome. Thanks, Andy. We have another question, and it might not be the best to answer right now, but if you have an answer, how about giving you know, people who hope to attend the digital teaching and learning strand but haven't had AVID yet, what if they were to do a 12-hour module training with staff developers from the district, or, you know, sometimes they have held strand trainings there. Would that suffice?
So I guess just for clarity, because I'm not 100% sure what those trainings would be and like what the content would be. So at least for the prerequisites for this strand, it would be finishing one of those, if I'm a content teacher, finishing one of those year one strands, whether that's a PATH training or a Summer Institute strand. Those are like the two that we're counting towards that prerequisite.
Yeah, the other thing to think about in terms of that digital teaching and learning, it's not meant to be a hammer to say, well, you got to have this training, and we also don't want to rush people through it, but there's going to be, especially when you're first year, there's a lot of those foundational Wicker strategies that are real key, and that's what we're looking to build during that time, whatever that looks like. And if you rush through that too quickly, then when they go into the digital teaching and learning, they're not only going to be trying to learn the new digital teaching content, but they're also then going to be struggling with those strategies because they really haven't utilized them in the classroom. So it's probably, I would actually recommend getting a real good foundation that first year so that they have, it's exciting training if you've never been there or experienced it. When I was a classroom teacher, it was my favorite thing and the best training that I ever received, speaking for myself. And they'll come out, they'll want to come back, and then I'd highly encourage them, give them a year to practice those strands in a, or the strategies in a class, and then the next year come back for the digital teaching and learning and take that next step forward that's going to launch them deeper into that aspect of it.
And if I could just build on that real quick, this is just our first digital strand. There will be more coming in the future, and teachers who are not in a one-to-one environment, they are definitely on our radar, and people that we want to support as well. So there will be strands or other training experiences developed in the future for those people. This strand just really represents the first step in for AVID into the digital world. So in addition to other audiences, long-term, does it need to be digital teaching and learning in a long time, or does it just become teaching and learning because digital devices are a part of what we do, right? So we're not trying to say you have to understand paper and pencil before you can do AVID digitally. It's more about those foundational AVID ideas and strategies, getting people coached up with those before then we come in and look at them through a digital lens. Further down the road in the future, technology would be included in every strand, and so they would be getting some of that in the foundational one as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Andy. A question for Tim. Will AVID coordinators receive a copy of the Bridges to Success book to add to the school's library, even if they are not a part of the training?
So I was thinking this question was going to come. To be determined. So it'll be a surprise. There's going to be, what I can tell you, it'll be a surprise to you, it's a surprise to me. There's some conversations that are being had, because there's a structured way in which this goes out in terms of when a book is rewritten that's designed as a fundamental, foundational implementation guide. And so, for example, when Elementary Foundations was rewritten last year, that book was available digitally because that's a foundational book. Same thing with the high school and middle school writing, is that when those are AVID elective and foundational for the AVID electives. So when Jen was talking about those strands earlier around writing, that book that goes with those two strands is also going to be available digitally. Bridges is a gray area that we're still trying to figure out. What I can tell you for sure is that there will be a book page that goes with this that will be launched June 1st along with the book. And so it might be, what I can tell you is going to be there are connections to some videos, a lot of the information in terms of key parts that we want to integrate in a digital way. There's also going to be a huge section on Schoolwide that's actually not a part of the book, but there's some information on Schoolwide. But if you log on June 1st, pleasant surprises. There might be a downloadable book, but I can't guarantee that yet. While we're on the topic, though, of libraries, one thing that I can tell you is that because I know there's some new schools that are coming on, it is a part of the library that's being built out. And so it's actually going to be provided in elementary, middle school, and high school actually as well. And so it'll come as a part of the library. And there's some other discussions that you'll hear about in the future in terms of libraries and some changes with that.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. Jen, we have a question for you. Disciplinary literacy is a new term for us. How do I explain what it means to my staff?
That's a great question. I think that in some ways, this is AVID's apology to every content area teacher that has been made to feel like they weren't carrying their weight when it came to literacy, and that we needed them to teach vocabulary and reading comprehension and all of these literacy skills without putting the framework before that it's about literacy within your content area. So it's really kind of opening that doorway into what does it mean to read and write and think like a mathematician or a scientist or an English literature person that loves to write, because that's its own sort of discipline, and that requires its own sort of disciplinary literacy skills. And the best person to teach those literacy skills is the math teacher in front of the room. And so it's really kind of just shining a light on this. It's also something that's very current in the world of education. Last year, ASCD put out, articles all year long, and in December, they posted their top 12, the ones that got the most feedback and the most likes and the most shares. And an article on disciplinary literacy as this new idea in education was one of their top articles of the year. And so I think it's something that if you haven't heard that term before, that's okay. Lots of people haven't. But it's really AVID's approach to how do we take literacy and make sure that when our students go on to their high school or to college or to their career, they really have the tools to engage in all areas because they have the literacy to do that. That's foundational to success.
Awesome. Thank you, Jen. Tim, we have a clarifying question around the digital download. Will there be a digital download for the new writing book beginning on June 1, but other new curriculum books are TBD for digital download?
So yes, well, writing will be available June 1 from the library page, the book page. The Bridges one specifically is the one that's the TBD, and so I can say that that's the gray area that we're still trying to figure out. Depending on which day you ask me, I'd have a different answer for you, and so hopefully I should know within a month, and we'll communicate that out. But at the moment, that's a gray area specifically for Bridges. The other thing I can mention is that we are looking at how we can also provide access to digital curriculum as a method. I'm not sure, I can't give a timeline of when those things are coming, but I know that is a real key piece that we're trying to work out. But that's farther in the future, not within this next year, and that's the digital part for the whole library that's to be determined.
Gotcha. Thanks so much for clarifying that, Tim. One more question. Are there any strands that any of you presenters would recommend for high school teachers who are hoping to help students who are performing below grade level?
So I can tell. So actually, I'm glad you asked that question because I mentioned earlier for brand new sites that are getting the library, Bridges is a part of the high school library, and so one thing that you can consider in an instance of potentially below grade level or potentially even with special education. That Bridges actually might be an area to go for that. The reason being is that if you're looking at a high school and they're working below grade level, so and I talked about that, it's designed for a 5th to 8th grade student. That's who it's written for in terms of developmentally what they're able to handle, of the skills and strategies that they're using. And so if you have some students that are working below, that potentially some of those real fundamental pieces, like the organization piece, like helping them break down more complex tasks, that you have a 9th grader that's maybe working, reading and just in general working at about a 7th grade level, that the potential of Bridges being able to help with some of those foundational skills might be a place. Same thing with the special education, that this might be because of the audience of who the book and the student intended for in that 5th to 8th, it might fit. And I think that a lot of people would get, the teachers would get a lot out of that. However, the caveat I do want to say is that the book is not specifically written for those audiences, and so also know that you're going into a strand where if I'm a 9th grade teacher, that there's going to be 5th and 6th grade students that are working on, whole content. So it's going to be kind of a different focus within that. But that would be probably my the best suggestion that I would have. The other one would be a student success that has, because there's a lot of also debrief time in that, where that's another pretty big audience where student success go into that strand. A critical reading strand or the writing strands would also be really great in those instances as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tim, and thank you, Jen and Andy. You guys did a great job, and thanks for all the questions and for joining us today. We will have this recording and slide deck sent out to you early next week, and we hope that you all have a wonderful Thursday, Friday, and weekend. Thanks so much. Bye.